There's a difference between being anxious about a volleyball, team tryout, anxious about completing a college application, anxiety about going to a party that your mom and dad are hosting for their work, and you're going to have to be a good girl. Yeah, you can be anxious about certain events, things, or conversations, but that doesn't mean you have anxiety. And I'm not sure all of our children and teenagers and even young adults understand that.
There are so many stats that are coming out right now that highlight the reality of depression, especially in young people. So many stats to the point that we almost expect our kids to have depression at some point in their life. What do we do when the culture just seems to normalize depression and mental health issues so much with kids? It can almost lead us as parents into dark places because we can expect our kids to be at that place. But today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy has some important insights for us to help us walk well in this moment. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, a University of Virginia doctor said 1 in 5 teens will experience some degree of mental health struggles. But the trick is to really create an environment where kids feel safe to talk about what they're going through. Sometimes I think it's natural for us as parents to not want to talk to our kids about how they're doing because inevitably, if you dig enough, you're going to find something that's kind of troubling, right? What should our mindset be as parents to build courage to help us to step into and engage our kids on some of these topics?
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's such a good point. Well, I do want us to look for what's good. So every time that we ask the kids about, their day or their friendships or, who did you hang with at the party or whatever, I want us to be expecting good answers, and I want us to look for the good, if you will, to hold a green pen. Ask about the strengths. Ask about, when were you the most joyful at the party? Whose conversations did you enjoy the most? What was the activity that you really enjoyed, bobbing for apples or, eating a caramel apple? Like, where did you get the greatest joy? So I think we ask a variety of questions and we look for, what is going to be good in that. I think we also talk about, and I share this a lot, Wayne, we talk about the evidence that we see. Children often have a hard time explaining what's going on. They don't have high language for challenging things. So notice what you notice and talk about that. Like, I noticed that you were irritable. What's up with that? I noticed that it's been harder and harder for you to get out of bed this week. What's up with that? Because evidence doesn't lie. So I think when we have these conversations and we do want to talk to our kids about how they're doing, go in with, and the arsenal that you have is the evidence that you have that they have become lazy, that they have become critical and irritable, that they are ignoring their siblings, and you're not going to put up with that because you're a family unit by God's intention. So have the arsenal of evidence and talk about that, and then let your kids see if they can wiggle out of that. And they won't be able to, because the evidence that you have is solid and strong. Let me say what I've said before, and that is that you don't have to be the expert. So you're having a conversation with your kid about school, church, life, the Lord, whatever, because you care and you love. And you say to the kids, no, I need you to answer these questions. You're my responsibility. I don't want to read your mind because I might get it wrong. So I need you to tell me, are you unhappy? It appears that you are. And can I do anything about that? And then you walk with them and you talk about how you're sometimes unhappy too. And I believe there are times when adults are unhappy and they don't know why. And there are times when you just have to wake up and snap out of it, and there's no friend that can necessarily help you do that. So we can model that for our kids so that they begin to understand what happens as you get older and older and life becomes more complex. And even in all of that, you have your experiences, but you don't need to be the expert. So if you uncover something that's troubling, like bullying or teasing, or they lied on a test, it's troublesome. You don't have to be the expert. Ask the kid, how do you think we should proceed? And you possibly call the teacher and say, I'm so sad to say that I found out that Kevin, cheated on the algebra test and he's remorseful with me. We'd like to have a conversation to find out what you think is the next best thing to do. You don't have to be the expert.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think that's helpful to think and put ourselves in that reality that we don't have to be the expert. But I want to ask you maybe a larger question, because so many experts are highlighting that 1 in 5 teens is battling with a mental health reality, a mental health struggle. And we look at that as parents and maybe even as culture, and we now assume or expect many of our teens to have this. Is that fair for our kids to be in that place where they just are in this, I would say, kind of like conglomerate of teens that it's normal and we've normalized now mental health challenges. And so when they might be wrestling with something, we expect them to kind of have it. So we start talking to them and we think that they're going to have some kind of challenge. Is that like really a true posture, or should we call out some of this when they might come to us and say, I've been really struggling with mental health? Do we talk about building that idea of resiliency and you can overcome these things? Or is there a posture that we have where we really look to, go and seek an expert and have them speak into this world? What should our posture be with that a lot of times?
Wow, all of the above is maybe what I would be tempted to say as I start. It is challenging. Here's the thing, not everybody has a mental health issue. When you buy a red car, all of a sudden you see all the red cars, right? You buy a white car, you think this would be cool, and all of a sudden you see all the white cars on the highway. Like, we see what we're looking for. So if you start talking to your kids, assuming that they're suicidal because you heard about a depressed state within the school, you're gonna find it. So be really careful of that because that would be, an exaggeration of what is real, and you don't wanna believe, if you will, the exaggeration. So I think we have to be careful. I like to say, and again, I'm not an expert here, there is a difference between being depressed and having depression. There's a difference between being anxious about a volleyball, team tryout, anxious about completing a college application, anxiety about going to a party that your mom and dad are hosting for their work, and you're gonna have to be a good girl. Yeah, you can be anxious about certain events, things, or conversations, but that doesn't mean you have anxiety. And I'm not sure all of our children and teenagers and even young adults understand that because, the headline is big and bold, this is the depressed generation. So I think let's be careful there. I would also say, although you didn't exactly ask this question, well, when you mentioned posture, like what's the posture that parents should have? What if I suggested to you that parents should be having meaningful conversations from the time that children can talk? From the time that they're 2, 3, 4 years old. We talk about what's going on and what made you happy and sad and what have you noticed. And you get your kids talking with you about, how was school and what did you do and how did you feel? What's the emotion you had? Did you notice anyone lonely? Did you choose to sit with them? Man, I'm so proud of you. When you're lonely, do you tell anyone? So we have conversations about what do we say about our identity, Wayne? It is physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual. And we should be talking with our children about all 5 of those categories from the time that they're old enough to talk and listen, so that when they're 7 and when they're 17, they come to us about this issue that they're having.
Yeah, I love that, Dr. Kathy. I love that idea of like driving our kids to want to come to us. But it kind of presupposes this idea that this is something that parents should really be engaged in. Why shouldn't parents have the expectation that maybe like the church or the youth pastor or the Christian school or someone else is going to be the one that kind of picks this up? I think oftentimes we look to those other, we would call them mediating institutions, these institutions that are existing between our kids and culture and us, and they kind of sit in the middle and they help guide our kids to really right cultural practices. If I could be super nerdy right now, would just kind of explain that for a second. I think that these mediating institutions, we put a lot of pressure on them to really be the ones that maybe identify or catch some of this. We think that our youth pastor or a Christian school or somebody kind of in their life should also be the ones that really call this out and maybe even be the ones that address it. Why should parents be the ones that engage this and have really that influence that we're talking about? And we don't just look to the church or the youth pastor. Or maybe I want to ask that bigger question. Should we also look to these mediating institutions to be primary engagers of this on the forefront too?
Yeah, great questions. Christian parents need to be the first of the first responders, if I can put it that way. This is Deuteronomy 6 and other biblical passages that would proclaim that our children are our responsibility first and foremost. And this is why we had them. We were aware that we would pass on family values and we would raise them up to be well and do well to the glory of God. So I don't want parents outsourcing this. I talk about this when I have opportunity quite a bit, actually. If you choose a mediating institution of a Christian school, of a church, youth group, children's church, piano lessons, soccer team. In my case, I was a part of a dance troupe. There's nothing evil or bad about any of that. And they might find something you won't notice because of the power of the group. So as a teacher of second graders, I had 28 one year, maybe 22 one year. When you got 22 second graders together, you begin to notice that second grader is different. But at home, the mom and dad don't know that their second grader is different because they don't have any other second graders to compare him to. And I'm not speaking about the glory of comparison. Comparison can actually be a very difficult, devilish kind of a thing. However, it does allow a youth pastor, children's pastor, therapist, counselor, school teacher to identify when a child is shy or different or more angry than the others. And this is where they make the phone call and, they pass on a text or an email and say, hey, let's talk about Jeremiah. He seems to be just, stressed about a lot. And maybe you didn't notice it at home. Doesn't mean you're wrong. That doesn't mean they're right for sure. But what it means is that a conversation needs to take place so that you can find out. So ideally, moms and dads, grandparents, the family unit is important. And then we get support when we feel that that's appropriate. We're fans here of homeschooling. Many of our listeners and followers are homeschoolers. We believe that homeschooling often works very, very well. A potential disadvantage of homeschooling is fewer adult messengers of truth. And if children begin to ignore mom and dad and all they have is mom and dad, they could plateau. Or it's possible that if they don't feel they can trust mom and dad with a big secret and they don't feel close to anybody else, that can be really damaging. So we would support that our homeschool families also make sure that their children have appropriate adult role models that they interact with enough so that often there can be some new discoveries maybe that are made.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of 1 Kings chapter 19, and I'll read from verse 11. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." This passage is really interesting because it comes after a really challenging part of Elijah's story. Elijah is a prophet of God who experiences some incredible fear and depression. Elijah had a powerful victory over the prophets of Baal, where God really demonstrated his power through fire from heaven. And Elijah was threatened by this Queen Jezebel, who vowed to kill him. Elijah fled into the wilderness and felt overwhelmed and afraid, really exhausted. He even prayed to God to take his life. Instead, God sent an angel to comfort him, giving him food and rest, and in a gentle whisper, God assured Elijah that he was not alone and really instructed Elijah to take the next steps, giving him a renewed sense of purpose. Elijah's story reveals the importance of really acknowledging fear and depression rather than ignoring it. God didn't rebuke Elijah for his fear and exhaustion, but met him with compassion, meeting really his physical needs and then gently guiding him through his worries. There's an act of surrender that enabled Elijah to receive comfort and strength from God, reminding Elijah that when we give our anxieties to God, he provides clarity and peace and renewed purpose. And at the end of this story is this passage where God says that he wants to pass by Elijah and show himself to him. God invited Elijah to come near to him and experience his presence. Instead of displaying force, God revealed himself in a gentle whisper, showing that in Elijah's moment of deep need, God's response was compassion and really intimate compassion. So when your kids are experiencing those sad times, maybe share this story with them. And I hope that that's an encouragement to you. I hope this whole podcast this week has been an encouragement to you. And I'm so glad that you would join us every day here at the Celebrate Kids podcast, specifically this daily segment, Facing the Dark. My name's Wayne Stender, and on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, we're so glad you joined us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.